The Adaptive Mind, A Journey from Analysis to Wisdom. Introduction, The Awakening. Marcus Chen stared at his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan office, the city's evening lights creating a kaleidoscope against the glass. The email on his screen had been sitting unanswered for 3 hours, another rejection of his innovative marketing strategy proposal. As a senior strategist at a prestigious consulting firm, he prided himself on data-driven insights and creative solutions. Yet for the 4th time this quarter, his ideas have been dismissed as too ambitious for our current client base. The irony wasn't lost on him. In business school, professors had praised his analytical rigor. His colleagues respected his ability to dissect complex problems. But somehow, in the real world of corporate politics and entrenched thinking, his best ideas seemed to hit invisible walls. The autumn rain began pattering against the windows, matching the rhythm of his restless fingers tapping on his mahogany desk. Around him, the office hummed with the quiet intensity of late evening work. Associates preparing presentations, partners taking calls with overseas clients. The familiar sounds usually energize him, but tonight they felt distant and hollow. As he gathered his things to leave, a voice from the adjacent workspace broke through his brooding. "Rough day." Dr. Elena Vasquez, an organizational psychology consultant who occasionally worked with her firm, looked up from her laptop with knowing eyes. Her silver-streaked hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her desk was organized with the precision of someone who had spent decades helping others navigate complex human dynamics. "You could say that," Marcus replied, surprised by his own willingness to engage. Normally, he kept his frustrations to himself, but something in her expression invited honesty. "I couldn't help but notice your sigh," she said with a gentle smile. "It reminded me of myself 30 years ago, when I was convinced everyone else was missing obvious solutions." Marcus paused in his packing, intrigued despite himself. "And what did you discover?" Elena closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair. That the real challenge wasn't in being right or wrong. It was in understanding how we think about thinking itself, how we process information, how we handle uncertainty, how we help others see new possibilities without threatening their sense of competence. What began as a casual conversation evolved into something more profound. Elena shared how her own journey had started with similar frustrations in academia, where she struggled to get colleagues to consider alternative approaches to organizational behavior. Over time, she had learned that true influence came not from proving others wrong, but from creating conditions where new understanding could emerge naturally. "The problem," Elena explained, gesturing toward the city lights below, "isn't that people can't think clearly. It's that we've been trained to think in rigid categories, right or wrong, logical or emotional, my way or their way. But the most complex challenges require something different, adaptive thinking." Marcus found himself opening up about his experiences at the firm. He described his meticulously researched proposals, his attempts to introduce innovative methodologies, and the consistent resistance he faced from senior partners who seemed wedded to approaches that had worked in the past. As he spoke, Elena listened with the kind of attention that made him feel truly heard. She asked questions that helped him see his situations from new angles, and slowly, a different picture began to emerge. "You know," she said after he finished, "many people believe that clear thinking is about logic and analysis, and it is, but it's also about understanding our own mental models, managing our emotional responses, and learning to see the value in perspectives different from our own. It's a journey that never really ends, but becomes more rewarding with each step." Over the next few months, Elena will become Marcus's guide in this journey. Through their regular conversations and the practical exercises she suggested, he would begin to develop a more nuanced understanding of how to think flexibly while maintaining his drive for excellence. This book follows Marcus's journey of discovery as he learns to question his own assumptions, navigate corporate politics more skillfully, and help others embrace more adaptive thinking. Through his story and the wisdom shared by Elena, we'll explore practical techniques for developing critical thinking skills that work in the real world of complex organizations and human relationships. Their conversations and Marcus's experiences offer insights into the challenges we all face when trying to think more clearly and communicate more effectively. The art of adaptive thinking isn't just about changing your mind. It's about understanding when and why to change it and how to help others do the same. Through Marcus's journey, we'll see how this delicate balance plays out in professional settings, from boardroom negotiations to team conflicts. As he discovers, the greatest obstacle to clear thinking often isn't external resistance, but our own deeply held beliefs and mental habits. The chapters that follow will take us through various aspects of adaptive thinking, from understanding our own thought patterns to helping others develop more flexible perspectives. Each chapter builds on the previous ones, providing a comprehensive approach to developing critical thinking skills that work in complex organizational environments. Marcus's journey reminds us that developing better thinking skills is not a destination, but a continuous process of growth and learning. Through his story, we'll see that the reward isn't just in better decision-making or more effective communication. It's in a richer, more nuanced understanding of ourselves and others that comes from learning to think more adaptively. Chapter 1. The Foundations of Adaptive Thinking. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about his conversation with Elena as he navigated through the crowded subway tunnels beneath Manhattan. The rhythmic clacking of the train wheels matched the cadence of thoughts flowing through his mind. Her words had stirred something in him, a recognition that perhaps his approach to workplace challenges needed more than just minor adjustments. The first step, she had told him over coffee in their firm's break room, is understanding that our thoughts are shaped by countless invisible influences. Our education, professional training, cultural background, and even our current stress levels all color how we see problems and solutions. Marcus reflected on his own background as the subway car swayed through the tunnels. As the son of immigrants who had built a successful engineering firm, he had internalized a deep belief in technical expertise and systematic analysis. While these values had served him well academically and in his early career, he wondered if they sometimes made him too rigid, too focused on being right rather than being effective. Elena had introduced him to the concept of mental frameworks during their conversation, the underlying structures we use to organize and interpret information. Think of them as the operating system running in the background of your mind, she had explained, using a tech analogy she knew would resonate with him. Everyone has them, but most people never examine what their particular system looks like or how it might need updating. The next morning at the office, Marcus began practicing what Elena called framework awareness. During a client strategy meeting, he caught himself making automatic judgments about a colleague's recommendations. Instead of immediately critiquing them, he paused and asked himself, "What assumptions am I making? What might I be missing?" His colleague, Jennifer, had proposed a more conservative approach to their client's digital transformation initiative. Normally, Marcus would push back immediately, advocating for a more aggressive strategy. Instead, he found himself genuinely curious about her reasoning. "Walk me through your thinking on the timeline," he said. "What factors are you weighing most heavily?" The surprise on Jennifer's face was evident. This wasn't the Marcus she was used to debating with. As she explained her perspective, Marcus realized she was incorporating crucial insights about the client's organizational culture and change management capacity that his analysis had overlooked. The meeting ended with a hybrid approach that balanced innovation with realistic implementation constraints, something that wouldn't have been possible if he'd maintained his usual stance. During their next coffee meeting, Elena smiled when Marcus shared this experience. "You discovered something important," she said. "Adaptive thinking isn't about abandoning your analytical skills. It's about expanding them. When we become curious about different perspectives instead of just defending our own, we often find that better solutions emerge." She went on to explain how emotions play a crucial role in thinking, not as obstacles to clear analysis, but as sources of valuable information. Our feelings tell us what we care about, what we're afraid of, what we might be overlooking. The key is learning to use them as data rather than letting them drive our conclusions. Marcus began practicing emotional awareness throughout his workday. During one particularly challenging client presentation, where his recommendations were being heavily criticized, he noticed himself becoming defensive. Instead of reacting immediately, he took a moment to acknowledge what he was feeling. "I'm feeling attacked," he told himself silently. "But maybe there's something valuable in this feedback that I'm missing because I'm focused on protecting my ego." This simple acknowledgement created enough space for him to listen more openly to the criticism. By the end of the presentation, he had identified several legitimate concerns that helped him refine his strategy significantly. Elena emphasized that adaptive thinking isn't about being uncertain or wishy-washy. Think of it as intellectual courage, she explained during one of their walks through Central Park. It takes strength to hold your convictions firmly enough to act decisively while remaining open to new evidence and perspectives. This concept helped Marcus navigate what Elena called the confidence paradox, maintaining the certainty needed for leadership while preserving the humility necessary for learning. He began to see that changing his mind based on new information wasn't a sign of weakness, but of wisdom. The real test came during a firm-wide initiative to update their client engagement methodology. Initially, Marcus was skeptical of the proposed changes, preferring their established approach. But remembering Elena's teachings, he decided to approach the situation differently. Instead of arguing against the changes, he began asking deeper questions about the benefits and challenges. He sought out colleagues who supported the new methodology, genuinely trying to understand their perspective. When he found himself forming judgments, he would pause and ask, "What if I'm missing something important here?" This openness led him to discover aspects of the new system that could genuinely improve their client relationships in ways he hadn't initially considered. More importantly, his balanced approach caught the attention of the firm's senior partners, who invited him to help lead the implementation process. "You've learned something crucial," Elena told him as they sat by the park's reservoir, watching joggers circle the path. Adaptive thinking isn't about being indecisive. It's about being strategic about when to hold firm and when to evolve. The strongest leaders know how to dance with uncertainty while still moving forward. As autumn deepened into winter, Marcus found this dance becoming more natural. His conversations with colleagues became richer, his client relationships more nuanced, his strategic recommendations more widely accepted. He was learning that true intellectual strength lay not in always being right, but in always being willing to grow. Chapter 2. Overcoming the Certainty Trap. The morning sun cast long shadows across Marcus's desk as he reviewed notes from his recent client meetings. His office wall, once covered with industry awards and analytical frameworks, now featured a simple quote he had written in bold letters. "Certainty is the enemy of insight." The words had come from his last conversation with Elena, and they had been reshaping his approach to complex problems ever since. Most professionals, Elena had told him over lunch at a quiet bistro near their office, aren't limited by what they don't know, but by what they're absolutely convinced they do know. The statement had struck him deeply, especially as he reflected on his recent interactions with David, a brilliant senior analyst whose unwavering confidence often created tension within their team. David was exceptional at financial modeling, with years of experience in market analysis, but his certainty about the right way to approach client problems had begun creating friction with other team members who brought different perspectives to their work. The previous day's strategy session had brought these issues to a head. "We've always approached market entry this way," David had insisted, his voice carrying that familiar tone of absolute conviction. "Changing our methodology now would introduce unnecessary risk." Marcus felt the old frustration rising, but this time something was different. Instead of engaging in their usual analytical debate, he remembered Elena's teachings about the psychology of certainty. "Tell me more about your experience with this approach," Marcus said, surprising both David and himself with a genuine curiosity in his voice. "What patterns have you noticed that make you confident in this direction?" The simple question opened up a conversation, unlike any they'd had before. David shared stories from his early career, including some painful lessons learned through trial and error. As Marcus listened, he began to understand that David's certainty wasn't just intellectual stubbornness. It was a protective mechanism, shielding him from the vulnerability of being wrong again. This insight shifted something in Marcus's perspective. The problem wasn't just about finding the right analytical approach. It was about the very human need for competence and security in an uncertain professional world. During his next meeting with Elena, he shared this realization. They met in her favorite neighborhood cafe, where the afternoon light created a warm atmosphere for reflection. "Ah," she said, smiling with recognition, "you've discovered one of the key paradoxes of adaptive thinking. The more certain we become about our expertise, the less likely we are to learn anything new." She went on to explain how certainty often acts as a barrier to innovation and problem-solving. Think of your mind like a muscle, she suggested, sketching on a napkin. When we're too rigid, we lose flexibility. But when we're too loose, we lose strength. The art is in finding dynamic balance. Confident enough to act, humble enough to adapt. Marcus thought about his own moments of absolute certainty, recognizing how they had often prevented him from seeing valuable alternatives. He remembered countless meetings where he had entered with his mind already made up, deaf to any perspective that didn't align with his preconceptions. But how do we maintain credibility as consultants if we're constantly questioning ourselves? He asked. Our clients pay us for expertise and confident recommendations. Elena nodded approvingly at the question. The goal isn't to eliminate confidence, it's to evolve it. Instead of certainty about conclusions, we can develop certainty about our process. Be confident in your ability to analyze, explore, and adapt, rather than being locked into specific answers. She shared a story from her own consulting career about a time when her confidence in a particular organizational intervention had been completely upended by unexpected client feedback. It was uncomfortable, she admitted, having to revise everything I thought I knew about team dynamics. But it was also exciting, like discovering a whole new dimension of organizational behavior. Marcus began applying this process-focused confidence in his daily work. When David raised concerns about new client proposals, instead of defending his position, he started asking questions. What scenarios worry you most about this approach? What would make you more comfortable with the risks we're taking? How might we test our assumptions before full implementation? The shift in his approach had unexpected effects throughout their team. Colleagues who had been quiet in strategy sessions began contributing more actively, sharing insights they might have previously kept to themselves. The atmosphere in their discussions changed from competitive to collaborative. One particularly memorable moment came during a client pitch. Marcus had been certain that his market analysis approach was superior to the alternatives, but remembering Elena's teachings, he deliberately opened the discussion to different methodologies. A junior analyst tentatively suggested a completely different framework, one that Marcus would have dismissed immediately just months earlier. Instead of rejecting it, he asked the team to explore the idea further. To his surprise, this alternative approach eventually proved more effective than his original plan, leading to insights that significantly enhanced their client recommendations. The experience was both humbling and liberating. It showed him that letting go of certainty didn't mean losing authority. If anything, it enhanced his leadership by creating space for collective intelligence. Elena helped him understand the deeper implications of this experience during one of their walks through the city. When we're certain, she explained, we stop asking questions. We stop being curious. We stop growing. But when we embrace uncertainty as a tool rather than a threat, we open ourselves to continuous learning and improvement. Marcus began to notice how certainty manifested in subtle ways, in the language people used, in their body language, in how they responded to new information. He saw it in himself, too, catching those moments when his mind would snap shut around a conclusion before fully exploring alternatives. The real breakthrough came when he started helping others recognize and work with their own certainty patterns. During a particularly tense client meeting about quarterly projections, he noticed the familiar signs of entrenched positions forming around the table. Instead of adding to the tension, he facilitated a different kind of discussion. What if we're all partially right about different aspects of this challenge? He suggested. How might we integrate these perspectives to create a more complete picture? The question created a subtle shift in the room's energy. People began speaking more tentatively, more thoughtfully, more openly. The projections they ultimately developed incorporated insights from multiple viewpoints in ways that created a more robust strategic foundation. As winter settled over the city, Marcus reflected on how far he had come. His office certificates still hung on the walls, but he saw them differently now, not as markers of fixed expertise, but as reminders of his ongoing journey of discovery. His phone buzzed with a message from David. Interesting points you raise in today's strategy session. I've been thinking about that alternative approach you mentioned. Maybe there's something worth exploring there. Marcus smiled, recognizing in the message the first signs of intellectual flexibility. The journey toward adaptive thinking was indeed contagious, and it was just beginning to spread through their organization. Chapter 3. The art of changing perspectives. The late afternoon sun streamed to the windows of Elena's office as Marcus found himself seated in a comfortable chair that seemed designed for deep conversations. This was their first meeting outside the usual coffee shops and corridors, and the change in setting felt significant. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, their spines telling stories of accumulated wisdom across psychology, philosophy, and organizational behavior. "You've made remarkable progress," Elena said, settling into her chair with a cup of herbal tea. "But today I want to explore something that many people find particularly challenging, the art of perspective taking, especially when stakes feel personal." Marcus thought about the team conflict that had been brewing at work. Despite his growing skills in adaptive thinking, he'd been struggling to bridge the gap between two brilliant colleagues who seemed fundamentally at odds about their firm's strategic direction. "I'm finding it easier to question my own assumptions," he admitted, "but helping others see different viewpoints feels almost impossible sometimes, especially when emotions run high." Elena smiled knowingly. "Before we talk about changing other people's perspectives, let's explore something deeper. Tell me about a time when you dramatically shifted your own viewpoint about something important, not just a work opinion, but something that really mattered to you." The question caught Marcus off guard. He sat quietly for a moment, then shared a story from his graduate school years when he'd been absolutely certain about pursuing a purely quantitative approach to business strategy. It had taken an internship at a startup focused on social impact to realize his true passion lay in work that combined analytical rigor with human-centered solutions. That transformation required two things you just identified, Elena observed, evidence that challenged your assumptions, and an environment where you felt safe to explore alternatives without judgment. People rarely change perspectives under pressure. They change when they feel secure enough to consider new possibilities. She walked to one of her bookshelves and pulled out a journal filled with her handwriting. "Look at this," she said, opening to entries from years earlier. "These are my thoughts about organizational change from 15 years ago. Reading them now, I disagree with about half of what I wrote. But at the time, I was absolutely convinced about these theories." Marcus glanced at the passionate arguments on the faded pages. "What changed your perspective?" "Research, experience, and most importantly, a willingness to be wrong," she replied. "But here's the crucial part. Every time I became absolutely certain about something, I made it a practice to actively seek out opposing viewpoints, not to argue against them, but to truly understand them." The conversation shifted to practical applications. Marcus shared his struggles with the current team dynamic, where two senior consultants, Rachel and Tom, were locked in disagreement about whether their firm should pursue more technology-focused clients or deepen their expertise in traditional industries. Elena nodded thoughtfully. "This is where most people make a critical error. They think that if they just present enough logical arguments, others will change their perspectives. But human beings aren't purely rational calculators. We're meaning-making creatures who use our emotions and identity to filter information." She explained how perspectives are often protected by deeper psychological needs, the need for competence, autonomy, and belonging. When someone resists a new viewpoint, they're often protecting something more fundamental than just an opinion. They might be protecting their sense of expertise, their relationships, or their professional identity. Marcus thought about Rachel, whose push for technology clients seemed driven not just by market analysis, but by her desire to position herself as forward-thinking. And Tom's advocacy for traditional industries reflected his deep relationships with long-term clients and his role as the firm's relationship expert. So how do we create conditions where people feel safe to consider alternatives? Marcus asked. By starting with psychological safety, Elena replied. When people feel that their competence and value are respected, they're more willing to examine their own perspectives. This starts with how you model the behavior yourself. Over the next week, Marcus experimented with this approach. Instead of trying to mediate between Rachel and Tom by finding a compromise, he began by acknowledging the wisdom in each of their perspectives. In their next team meeting, he started differently. Before we dive into strategy options, I want to recognize that both Rachel and Tom are bringing crucial insights to this discussion. Rachel's technology focus is helping us see emerging opportunities, while Tom's industry relationships give us deep client understanding. The question isn't which direction is right, but how we might integrate both strengths. The shift was subtle but noticeable. Instead of defending their positions, both began explaining their reasoning more openly. Rachel shared her concerns about the firm falling behind competitors who were embracing AI and automation. Tom described his observations about how their traditional clients were struggling with rapid change and needed trusted advisors to help them navigate uncertainty. As they talked, Marcus practiced what Elena called perspective mirroring, reflecting back what he heard in ways that showed deep understanding. Rachel, it sounds like you're concerned that if we don't build technology capabilities now, we'll lose relevance with innovative clients. Is that right? And to Tom, you're seeing how our established relationships give us unique positioning to help traditional companies evolve thoughtfully. Do I have that correct? Both felt heard in ways they hadn't before, and something began to shift in the room's dynamics. Instead of debate between two camps, it became an exploration of how to serve different types of clients more effectively. The breakthrough came when Rachel said, "Actually, some of my technology clients have been asking for help with change management. They have the tools, but struggle with adoption. Maybe there's overlap I hadn't considered." Tom nodded. "And several of my traditional industry clients have been asking about digital transformation, but don't know where to start. They need someone who understands both their business and the technology landscape." Marcus shared the success with Elena during their next meeting. It's remarkable how quickly the conversation changed once people felt their perspectives were truly understood rather than just tolerated. "You've discovered something profound," Elena replied. "The most effective way to help others examine their perspectives is to show them that it's safe and valuable to do so. When people see you growing and adapting without losing your effectiveness or credibility, it gives them permission to do the same." This insight proved transformative not just for team dynamics, but for client relationships. Marcus began bringing the same approach to client meetings, helping different stakeholders feel heard before moving toward solutions. During one particularly complex consulting engagement, he noticed client team members becoming entrenched in their positions about implementation priorities. Instead of pushing toward resolution, he facilitated what he called a wisdom integration session. "Each department is seeing critical aspects of this challenge," he told the client team. "Instead of choosing between perspectives, let's explore how each insight might inform a more comprehensive solution." The process took longer than a typical strategy session, but the solution that emerged incorporated insights from operations, finance, marketing, and IT in ways that created buy-in across the organization. As spring arrived in the city, Marcus reflected on how this journey had changed not just his professional approach, but his entire way of engaging with different viewpoints. The rigid thinking that had once limited his influence was being replaced by a more flexible, inclusive approach that seemed to bring out the best in everyone around him. Elena smiled when he shared this observation. "Remember," she said, "changing perspectives, your own or others, isn't about winning debates or proving points. It's about creating spaces where better understanding can emerge. And that understanding usually leads to solutions none of us could have imagined working alone." Chapter 4. Navigating Emotional Currents. Rain drummed steadily against the windows of Marcus's apartment as he stared at his phone, finger hovering over his mother's contact. Their last conversation about his career choices had ended in frustrated silence, with his mother expressing disappointment that he hadn't pursued the engineering path that had worked so well for his father. The weight of family expectations pressed heavily on his shoulders, making it difficult to think clearly about their relationship. Elena's words from their recent session echoed in his mind. "The greatest test of adaptive thinking comes when our emotions are deeply engaged. Logic alone won't navigate these waters." He had arrived at their morning meeting already unsettled, the tension from home affecting his usual professional composure. The familiar warmth of Elena's office, with its soft lighting and comfortable chairs, couldn't entirely ease his inner turmoil. "My mother sent me another article about successful engineers," he had told Elena, trying to keep his voice steady. "She still can't understand why I left a stable career path for consulting. I know I should be able to discuss this rationally with her, but every conversation feels like an emotional minefield." Elena had listened intently, her eyes kind but probing. "There's a common misconception," she said, "that adaptive thinking means suppressing our emotions to think purely rationally. Nothing could be further from the truth. Emotions are vital information sources. They're not obstacles to clear thinking, but essential components of it. She reached for a small notebook on her side table, one that looked well-used and thoughtfully maintained. Years ago, I worked with a brilliant surgeon who prided himself on being completely logical and unemotional in his decision-making. But his best medical judgments invariably came when he allowed himself to feel genuine empathy for his patients while still maintaining analytical precision. Marcus leaned forward, intrigued. But how do you balance emotions with rational analysis, especially when emotions feel overwhelming? Think of emotions like currents in a river, Elena suggested, gesturing toward the rain streaming down her window. You can't stop the current, but you can learn to navigate it skillfully. The key isn't to eliminate emotions from your thinking process, but to understand what they're telling you and how to work with them wisely. She went on to explain how emotions often carry crucial information about values, needs, and unexamined assumptions. The frustration Marcus felt when talking with his mother wasn't just about career choices. It reflected deeper issues about autonomy, respect, and a desire for parental approval. Your frustration is telling you something important, Elena said. Instead of trying to think around it, try exploring what it's trying to communicate. What does it feel like when your mother questions your career choice? Marcus thought carefully. It feels like she doesn't trust my judgment, like all my professional success doesn't matter compared to the path she envisioned for me. And that makes me defensive, which makes it harder to really hear what she's saying. Exactly, Elena nodded. And that emotional insight helps us understand both your reaction and possibly your mother's motivation. Her questions might come from her own emotional needs, perhaps concern for your future or a desire to share something she values deeply. This framework began to transform how Marcus approached emotional situations at work. During a particularly challenging project review, he noticed himself becoming defensive about criticism of his strategic recommendations. Instead of either suppressing the feeling or letting it drive his responses, he paused to examine it. I'm feeling attacked and dismissed, he acknowledged silently. What's this emotion telling me? The defensive feeling revealed his insecurity about a specific aspect of the project, an area where he actually could use input from colleagues. Rather than defending against the criticism, he found himself asking clarifying questions that led to valuable improvements in the strategy. The real test came when he decided to have that difficult conversation with his mother. He prepared carefully, using the techniques Elena had taught him about integrating emotional awareness with clear thinking. Mom, he began when they met for dinner at their usual restaurant, I know consulting isn't the path you and Dad envisioned for me, and I understand why that concerns you. He paused, allowing himself to feel both his appreciation for her care and his need for autonomy. But I need you to understand something important about my work and why it matters to me, he continued, maintaining both emotional connection and clarity of purpose. The conversation that followed wasn't easy, but it was different from their previous encounters. By acknowledging both the emotional and practical aspects of their disagreement, they found new ways to understand each other. His mother shared concerns about job security in consulting that he hadn't fully grasped. He expressed how meaningful it was to solve complex problems for organizations that were trying to make positive impacts. By the end of their dinner, neither had completely changed their position, but both felt heard and understood in ways that had been missing from their relationship. Later that week, as Marcus shared the experience with Elena, he realized how much his approach to thinking had evolved. It's not just about logic anymore, he said. It's about bringing both intellectual analysis and emotional intelligence to complex situations. They inform each other rather than competing. Elena smiled, clearly pleased with his growth. Now you're discovering the true art of adaptive thinking. It's not about choosing between head and heart, but learning to integrate them both as sources of wisdom. This integration became increasingly valuable as Marcus faced more complex challenges at work. When team conflict arose, he found he could address both the analytical and emotional dimensions simultaneously. When client relationships became strained, he could maintain professional objectivity while remaining sensitive to underlying concerns and feelings. One particular situation tested this integrated approach significantly. A major client was considering terminating their contract after a project deliverable didn't meet their expectations. Marcus's initial instinct was to focus solely on the technical aspects, revising the analysis, improving the presentation, addressing their specific concerns with data and logic. but applying his expanded understanding of adaptive thinking. He realized there were emotional currents beneath the client's dissatisfaction that needed attention as well. They felt unheard during the project process and questioned whether the consulting team truly understood their organizational culture. Rather than just fixing the deliverable, Marcus facilitated conversations that addressed both the analytical gaps and the relationship dynamics. The result was not only a saved client relationship, but a deeper partnership that led to additional work and referrals. As autumn rain continued to fall outside his apartment, Marcus reflected on this journey of integration. His phone showed a message from his mother. "Enjoyed our conversation last week. I'm starting to understand more about what you do. Maybe you can tell me more about that healthcare project you mentioned." Marcus smiled, recognizing that their relationship was evolving in ways that honor both logical understanding and emotional connection. Elena had been right. The most complex challenges required both analytical rigor and emotional wisdom, working together rather than opposition. The art of adaptive thinking he was learning wasn't about perfecting his logical faculties or managing his emotions separately. It was about developing capacity to navigate complex human situations with both intellectual clarity and emotional intelligence, each informing and strengthening the other. Chapter 5. Breaking Through Mental Barriers. A thin layer of morning fog hung over Central Park as Marcus made his way to an early client meeting. Today felt different. He was about to propose a comprehensive reorganization of their client's strategic planning process, a bold initiative that 6 months ago would have paralyzed him with anxiety. Now, while butterflies still danced in his stomach, he felt a deeper sense of confidence beneath the nervousness. The previous evening, during what had become their regular Wednesday sessions, Elena had helped him understand why this moment felt so different. They had met at a quiet bookstore cafe, the towering shelves creating an intimate atmosphere for their increasingly profound conversations. "Tell me," she had said, stirring honey into her tea, "what's changed in how you approach ambitious proposals like this one?" Marcus had considered the question carefully. "I used to be obsessed with having the perfect plan. Every detail mapped out, every objection anticipated. Now I'm more focused on creating something good enough to start with that can evolve through collaboration. I'm not attached to being right about every detail anymore." Elena had nodded approvingly. "You've discovered one of the most powerful aspects of adaptive thinking, the ability to hold your ideas firmly enough to act on them, but loosely enough to let them evolve. It's what I call breaking through perfection barrier." She had reached for a piece of paper and begun sketching a simple diagram. "Think of your mind like a house," she explained. "We all build mental walls of protection, barriers of certainty, perfection, and control that help us feel safe and competent. But sometimes these walls become prisons, keeping out new possibilities and collaborative improvements." Marcus had thought about the mental walls he had constructed over the years. His belief that strategic plans must be comprehensive and detailed before presentation. His assumption that showing uncertainty would undermine his credibility. His fear that opening ideas to collaborative development would lead to compromised solutions. "The key," Elena had continued, "isn't to tear down all your protective structures at once. It's about learning to create windows and doors, points of entry for new perspectives while maintaining your core foundation of expertise and judgment." Now, as Marcus entered the client's conference room, he felt the wisdom of this approach. He had spent weeks gathering input from various stakeholders, incorporating their insights into a framework rather than a fixed plan. More importantly, he had learned to view potential resistance not as opposition to overcome, but as valuable feedback to integrate. As team members settled around the polished conference table, Marcus began differently than he would have in the past. "Before I share what I've been developing, I want to acknowledge that what I'm proposing represents significant change in how we approach strategic planning. I don't expect us to finalize everything today. Instead, I hope we can explore these ideas together, building on everyone's experience to create something stronger than what any of us could develop alone." The shift in the room was palpable. Where previous presentations had often felt like battles between competing viewpoints, this one took on collaborative atmosphere of a workshop. Even typically resistant team members began offering suggestions and raising concerns in constructive ways. Marcus remembered Elena's guidance about holding space for different perspectives. When disagreements arose, he resisted the urge to defend his framework immediately. Instead, he asked questions, sought clarification, and looked for the valuable insights hidden within opposing viewpoints. To his surprise, the most vocal skeptic, Patricia, became one of the proposal's strongest supporters by the end of the meeting. "You've actually addressed concerns I didn't know I had," she said during a break. "And the way you're approaching this feels less like imposed change and more like organizational evolution." Later that week, as Marcus shared the meeting's success with Elena during their usual walk through Central Park, he realized how far he had traveled from the frustrated consultant who had first encountered her months ago. But something else was emerging in their conversations, a growing awareness of how these principles applied beyond professional settings. "I feel like I'm making real progress at work," he admitted, "but I'm struggling to apply these same ideas in my personal relationships, especially with close friends and family. The stakes feel higher somehow, more emotionally charged." Elena paused beside the park's reservoir, watching runners circle the path. "Often our deepest mental barriers are built around our most important relationships. Tell me about a specific situation where you're finding it difficult to apply these principles." Marcus told her about his best friend Alex's recent decision to leave a stable corporate job to start an independent design studio. "I want to be supportive, but I keep finding myself trying to talk him out of it. I can't seem to stop focusing on all the financial risks and practical concerns." "Ah," Elena said, her expression knowing. "What scares you about Alex's decision?" The question caught Marcus off guard. As he sat with it, he began to recognize his own fears reflected in his reaction to Alex's choice. His concern wasn't just about his friend's financial security. It touched on deeper questions about career stability, the nature of success, and the courage to pursue unconventional paths. "Sometimes," Elena suggested gently, "our strongest resistance to others' choices comes from the parts of ourselves we're not ready to examine. Your journey in adaptive thinking isn't just about analyzing external situations. It's about understanding the hidden barriers within your own mind." This insight led to a profound shift in Marcus's relationship with Alex. Instead of trying to protect his friend from potential failure, he began asking questions about his creative vision, his concerns, and his plans for building sustainable income. Their conversations became deeper, more honest, and ultimately more supportive. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself breaking through more mental barriers both at work and in his personal life. He learned to recognize when his resistance to an idea came from genuine analytical concerns versus unconscious fear or discomfort. He practiced staying open to possibilities while maintaining healthy skepticism. One evening, as autumn rain began falling over the city, Elena asked Marcus what he considered his most significant breakthrough so far. "I used to think adaptive thinking was about finding the right answer," he replied, watching droplets streak down the cafe window. "Now I understand it's about creating space for better questions. It's about having the courage to examine our own mental barriers while respecting protective walls that still serve a purpose." Elena nodded, a familiar warmth in her eyes. "And in that understanding," she said, "lies a foundation for everything we'll explore next." Chapter 6. The Ripple Effect. The winter holidays had brought an unexpected opportunity. Marcus stood at the window of a mountain conference center, watching snowflakes dance in the crisp morning air. His firm's annual leadership retreat had arrived at a perfect time for him to test how far his adaptive thinking skills had developed. A year ago, he would have approached this 3-day intensive with strategic calculations and competitive positioning. Now he felt genuine curiosity about what might emerge from collaborative exploration. Interesting how our relationship with uncertainty evolves. Elena had observed during their last session before the retreat. They had met at her office, the warmth of her small fireplace creating a perfect atmosphere for reflection. When we stop seeing ambiguity as a threat, it becomes an invitation for discovery. Marcus thought about how much had changed since he first started working with Elena. His team dynamics had shifted dramatically, and word spread throughout the firm about his innovative approaches to client engagement and problem-solving. Other departments had begun seeking his input on managing complex change initiatives and resolving multi-stakeholder conflicts. The retreat's opening exercise proved to be an immediate test of these evolved skills. Teams were challenged with designing a comprehensive market entry strategy for a hypothetical company, using only limited information and conflicting stakeholder priorities. Marcus found himself paired with Lisa from business development and James from operations, two departments that traditionally approach problems from very different angles. As they began their work, Marcus noticed familiar patterns of potential conflict emerging. Lisa focused on aggressive market capture and brand positioning, while James emphasized operational feasibility and risk management. In the past, such fundamental differences might have led to frustration and compromised solutions that satisfied no one. Instead, Marcus saw an opportunity to apply what he'd learned. What if we approach this differently? He suggested. Instead of seeing growth ambition and operational prudence as competing priorities, what if they're actually two essential components of the same successful strategy? He encouraged them to share their underlying reasoning, not just their preferred approaches. The conversation that followed revealed surprising connections. James's caution stemmed from his experience with market entries that had failed due to inadequate infrastructure preparation. Lisa's aggressiveness came from seeing competitors succeed by moving quickly into emerging opportunities. Their final presentation won recognition, not just for strategic soundness, but for innovative integration of different perspectives. More importantly, the process had created new working relationships that would continue long after the retreat. How did you do that? Lisa asked afterward as they walked through the snow-covered grounds. I've never had such productive strategic conversation with operations before. During the retreat's final session, Marcus found himself sharing insights with a broader group about collaborative problem-solving. He described how shifting from competitive to integrative thinking had transformed his client work and team relationships. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with several senior partners expressing interest in incorporating these approaches into their practice development initiatives. Back in the city, Marcus shared these experiences with Elena during their first post-retreat meeting. The winter light filtering through her office windows seemed to mirror the clarity he was feeling about his professional evolution. You're describing something significant, Elena observed. When we develop adaptive thinking skills deeply enough, they create what I call resonant effects, positive changes that extend far beyond our immediate sphere of influence. She explained how this phenomenon worked. When one person in the system begins thinking more flexibly and collaboratively, it influences the mental models and behaviors of everyone around them. You're not just solving problems anymore, she said. You're creating environments where better solutions can emerge naturally. This insight was tested sooner than Marcus expected. The following week, a major disagreement erupted between two client teams about implementation priorities for a digital transformation project. The client's IT department wanted to prioritize technical infrastructure, while their operations team pushed for immediate user experience improvements. Instead of falling into the usual pattern of stakeholder mediation, Marcus applied his expanded understanding of systems thinking. He guided both groups through a different kind of exploration, focusing first on understanding each other's constraints and success metrics rather than jumping to solutions. What would success look like from your perspective? He asked the IT team. And what are your biggest concerns about the current timeline? He posed similar questions to operations, helping each side articulate not just their preferences but their underlying needs and fears. As the teams shared their deeper concerns, new possibilities emerged that neither had initially considered. They discovered that their priorities, while seemingly conflicting, actually addressed different aspects of the same user adoption challenge. The breakthrough came when they realized that technical infrastructure improvements could be designed to immediately enhance user experience, while UX improvements could be structured to support long-term technical scalability. By the meeting's end, they had developed an integrated implementation plan that exceeded both teams' original expectations. More significantly, they had established a collaborative working relationship that would serve them well throughout the project. "You've changed," said Patricia, the client's project director, as they reviewed the plan afterward. "Not just your technical approach, but how you help people think together. It's like you figured out how to turn conflicts into opportunities for innovation." Marcus shared this feedback with Elena during their next session, recognizing how his understanding of adaptive thinking continued to evolve. "I'm starting to see patterns everywhere," he said. "Every challenging situation seems to contain the seeds of its own solution, if we can create the right conditions for people to explore together." Elena smiled, clearly pleased with his growth. You're discovering something profound about human systems. When we create spaces for authentic collaboration, where people feel heard, respected, and intellectually challenged, remarkable innovations emerge that none of us could have imagined working alone. This understanding became increasingly central to Marcus's professional identity. He began developing what he called collaborative inquiry processes, structured approaches for helping diverse groups explore complex challenges together. His reputation as a strategic consultant evolved to include recognition as someone who could facilitate breakthrough thinking in difficult situations. One evening, as Marcus reflected on these changes during his commute through the city, he realized how profoundly his relationship with conflict and complexity had transformed. What once felt like obstacles to overcome now felt like invitations to deeper understanding and creative solution finding. Elena had been right about the ripple effects. The adaptive thinking skills he developed weren't just changing his own effectiveness. They were creating positive changes throughout his professional and personal networks. Colleagues were beginning to approach problems more collaboratively. Clients were engaging more openly in strategic discussions, and even his family relationships had grown richer and more nuanced. The journey was far from over, but Marcus could see how each breakthrough in his own thinking created possibilities for others to grow and adapt as well. The art of adaptive thinking, he was learning, was ultimately about nurturing wisdom, not just in himself, but in the communities and systems of which he was part. Chapter 7. Teaching Others to Navigate. The conference room hummed with anticipation as Marcus faced 18 eager participants in his firm's inaugural Adaptive Strategy Workshop. He had been asked to develop and lead this program based on the innovative approaches he'd been pioneering with clients and colleagues. The invitation both honored and challenged him. Teaching others to think adaptively would test the depth of his own understanding. Elena's voice echoed in his mind from their preparation session the previous week. Teaching adaptive thinking is perhaps the greatest test of our own mastery. We can't simply transfer techniques. We have to help people discover new ways of engaging with complexity and uncertainty. The morning sun streamed to windows as Marcus began with a question that had become central to his own journey. What does it mean to think strategically in a world where the problems we face are more complex than any single perspective can fully grasp? The silence that followed was rich with contemplation. Before diving into frameworks or methodologies, Marcus shared his own story, the frustrations that led to his work with Elena, the gradual transformation of his approach, and the ongoing nature of this developmental journey. As he spoke, he noticed a subtle relaxation that came over the room. Shoulders uncrossed, notebooks open, and faces softened with recognition. By acknowledging his own struggles and uncertainties, he had created permission for others to admit their own challenges with complex thinking. The most difficult lesson I learned, he continued, wasn't about mastering specific techniques. It was realizing that adaptive thinking isn't about having the right answers. It's about developing better questions and creating conditions where insights can emerge from unexpected directions. A participant named Sarah raised her hand. But how do you maintain credibility with clients when you're admitting uncertainty? I often find myself paralyzed between wanting to explore alternatives and needing to project confidence in my recommendations. The question resonated deeply with Marcus, remembering his own struggles with this paradox. Drawing on Elena's guidance, he addressed Sarah's concern directly. Think of it like being a skilled guide in unfamiliar territory, he suggested. You don't need to know every detail of the landscape ahead of time, but you do need confidence in your ability to read the terrain, adapt to changing conditions, and help your team navigate safely toward your destination. He went on to guide the group through exercises he had developed, combining Elena's insights with his own discoveries from client work. They practiced identifying mental models, exploring different stakeholder perspectives, and recognizing emotional undercurrents that could influence strategic decisions. During a role-playing exercise where participants had to navigate a complex merger scenario, Marcus observed something fascinating. Those who struggled most were often the most technically competent. Their expertise sometimes became a barrier to considering alternative approaches or acknowledging the limits of their knowledge. This is what I call the competence paradox. He explained during a debrief session. The more skilled we become in our particular domain, the harder it can be to remain open to insights from other areas or to admit when our expertise might not apply to a novel situation. The workshop's turning point came during the afternoon, when a heated debate erupted between two participants about the best approach to organizational change management. Instead of intervening with his own opinions, Marcus saw an opportunity for live demonstration. "Let's pause for a moment," he suggested. "Rather than defending your preferred approaches, I'd like each of you to try something different. Can you articulate the other person's perspective so clearly that they would agree with your description of their viewpoint?" The exercise transformed the debate into genuine dialogue. As participants practiced deep listening and perspective-taking, new insights emerged that enriched everyone's understanding of change management principles. The room came alive with energy as people began applying this approach to their own professional challenges. Later that evening, Marcus shared the day's experiences with Elena over dinner at their favorite neighborhood restaurant. "It's remarkable how teaching others deepened my own understanding," he reflected. "Every question they asked forced me to examine my assumptions and articulate principles I have been applying intuitively." Elena smiled knowingly. "That's one of the beautiful paradoxes of wisdom. We often discover what we truly understand only when we try to help others learn it. But there's something else happening in your workshop that's equally important." She paused to take a sip of wine before continuing. "You're not just teaching techniques. You're modeling a way of being with uncertainty and complexity. Your willingness to share your own learning journey, including mistakes and ongoing challenges, creates space for others to embrace their own growth process." This insight proved valuable in the weeks that followed as Marcus began one-on-one mentoring relationships with several workshop participants. Each brought unique challenges that expanded his understanding of how adaptive thinking principles applied in different contexts. There was David, a brilliant financial analyst whose fear of being wrong often led to analysis paralysis. Working with him, Marcus developed new approaches to what he called confident uncertainty, the ability to move forward with incomplete information while remaining open to course corrections. Then there was Jennifer, a senior manager struggling to bridge generational differences in her team. Together, they explored how different life experiences and professional backgrounds shape people's approaches to problem solving and developed strategies for turning these differences into competitive advantages. Perhaps most challenging was Robert, whose sharp intellect and strong opinions often created tension with colleagues. Marcus recognized elements of his former self in Robert's certainty-driven approach. The breakthrough came when Marcus shared his own story of learning to hold convictions more lightly. "The strongest leaders," he told Robert during one of their conversations, "are often those who can stand firmly on principles while remaining genuinely curious about alternative approaches. It's not about being wishy-washy. It's about being strategically flexible." As winter transitioned toward spring, Marcus noticed profound changes in those he was mentoring. More importantly, he found himself growing through the process. Each person's unique challenges became an opportunity for him to deepen his own understanding of adaptive thinking principles. During his next session with Elena, as they walked through Central Park among the early spring blossoms, he shared this realization. "It's like each person I work with adds a new dimension to my understanding of what it means to think adaptively. Their questions and struggles help me see aspects of these principles I might have missed." Elena nodded approvingly, and that understanding points to something profound about the nature of wisdom itself. It's not a static achievement, but a dynamic process of continuous learning and growth. The best teachers are always students, and the most effective mentors never stop discovering. Marcus reflected on how far he had traveled from that frustrated consultant who had first encountered Elena in their office building. Now he was helping others navigate their own journeys toward more adaptive, collaborative, and wise approaches to complex challenges. The ripple effects were spreading in ways he could never have imagined when this journey began. "Remember," Elena added, "watching cherry blossoms drift on the spring breeze. Teaching others to think adaptively isn't just about sharing knowledge. It's about nurturing the capacity for wisdom in them and in yourself. And that nurturing never really ends." Chapter 8. When Worlds Converge. A spring thunderstorm rattled the windows of Marcus's apartment as he stared at an email that would test everything he had learned about adaptive thinking. His consulting firm had been selected to lead a major organizational transformation for a Fortune 500 healthcare company, a project that would affect thousands of employees and potentially influence how an entire industry approached technological integration. The challenge wasn't just professional scope. It was deeply personal. The client was the same hospital system where his younger sister worked as a nurse, making this engagement convergence of his professional expertise and family relationships in ways he hadn't anticipated. Complex challenges often test multiple dimensions of our adaptive thinking simultaneously. Elena had told him during their recent session in her office garden, where spring flowers were beginning to bloom. When our personal values, professional responsibilities, and strategic thinking skills must all align under pressure, we discover what we've truly learned. Marcus watched her tend to young seedlings as she spoke, noting how she carefully balanced nurturing growth while pruning away elements that might hinder development. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. The key, she continued, is remembering that adaptive thinking isn't just about solving isolated problems. It's about holding space for transformation that honors both innovation and human dignity. As he prepared for the first major client meeting, Marcus drew upon everything he had learned. The healthcare system was facing intense pressure to integrate artificial intelligence and automation into their operations while maintaining their commitment to personalized patient care. Different stakeholder groups had radically different perspectives on how to proceed. The conference room was packed when Marcus arrived, representing a microcosm of competing interests. Administrators focused on cost efficiency, physicians concerned about decision-making autonomy, nurses worried about patient relationships, and technology specialists eager to implement cutting-edge solutions. Instead of starting with his analysis or proposed frameworks, Marcus did something that would have been impossible for him a year earlier. Before we discuss any specific changes, he began, I want to acknowledge what this transformation means for each of you personally. This isn't just about implementing new systems or improving efficiency metrics. It's about the future of healthcare and how technology can enhance rather than replace human judgment and compassion. The shift in the room was subtle but noticeable. Instead of defensive positioning, people began sharing genuine concerns about how technological changes might affect their ability to serve patients effectively. Dr. Sarah Martinez, a senior physician, voiced what many were feeling. I'm not opposed to technology. I'm concerned about losing the human insight that comes from years of clinical experience. How do we ensure that AI enhances rather than overrides medical judgment? Marcus used the listening and integration skills Elena had taught him, helping each group feel heard while identifying common ground. What I'm hearing, he reflected, is that everyone shares the same core commitment, providing the best possible patient care. The question isn't whether to embrace technology, but how to implement it in ways that strengthen rather than weaken the human elements that make healthcare effective. Over the following weeks, Marcus found himself applying adaptive thinking principles in ways that bridged the professional and personal worlds. His sister Lisa became an informal advisor, helping him understand the daily realities that nurses faced and how proposed changes might affect patient relationships. The administrators see efficiency gains, she told him over dinner one evening, but they don't see how rushed interactions affect patient trust and healing. There's wisdom in both perspectives, but someone needs to help them talk to each other rather than past each other. This insight led Marcus to develop what he called wisdom integration sessions, structured dialogues where different stakeholder groups could share not just their professional requirements, but their deeper values and concerns about healthcare transformation. During one particularly powerful session, a nurse named James shared a story about how building relationships with patients had been crucial in identifying symptoms that technology had missed. A data scientist responded by describing how AI could actually free up time for these important human interactions by handling routine analytical tasks more efficiently. We're not choosing between human care and technological advancement, Marcus observed, facilitating the conversation. We're exploring how they can enhance each other. The breakthrough came when they began designing implementation pilots that combined technological efficiency with enhanced human connection. Instead of replacing human judgment with AI, they developed systems that augmented clinical decision-making while preserving the relational aspects of healthcare that patients valued most. During his next session with Elena, as spring rain created patterns on her office windows, Marcus reflected on how this project had challenged him in unexpected ways. I realize that adaptive thinking isn't just about professional problem solving, he said. It's about integrating different aspects of our lives and values in ways that create more comprehensive solutions. Elena nodded thoughtfully. When we develop adaptive thinking deeply enough, The boundaries between personal and professional wisdom begin to dissolve. We start seeing how our human experiences inform our strategic insights, and how our analytical skills can enhance our relationships and community contributions. This integration was tested when the healthcare project faced its first major crisis. A preliminary pilot program had revealed unexpected workflow disruptions that threatened to undermine staff morale and patient satisfaction. Traditional consulting approaches might have focused solely on technical adjustments, but Marcus drew on his expanded understanding of human systems. He organized what he called learning circles, gatherings where clinical staff, administrators, and technology teams could explore the disruptions together, treating them as sources of valuable information rather than simply problems to be solved. Every challenge contains insights about how to create better solutions, he told the combined group. Instead of just fixing what's broken, let's understand what these problems are teaching us about how to design technology that truly serves both efficiency and human care. The process that followed was messy and sometimes uncomfortable, but it led to innovations that none of them could have imagined working separately. They developed AI systems that not only improved diagnostic accuracy, but also provided clinical staff with more complete information for patient conversations. They created efficiency tools that freed up time for the human connections that patients valued most. One evening, as Marcus walked to the hospital where his sister worked, he overheard a conversation between two nurses discussing how the new systems were actually helping them provide better patient care. "It's like having a really smart assistant," one said, "that handles a routine analysis, so I can focus on understanding what the patient really needs." During their next spring session, Elena smiled as Marcus shared this overheard conversation. "You've learned something profound," she said. "The highest form of adaptive thinking creates solutions that honor multiple forms of wisdom simultaneously: technical expertise, human experience, organizational needs, and individual values." As the spring thunderstorm outside his apartment began to subside, Marcus reflected on how this project had transformed not just his professional capabilities, but his understanding of how personal growth and systemic change could reinforce each other. The skills Elena had helped him develop were no longer just consulting tools. They had become a way of approaching life's complexity with both analytical rigor and human wisdom. His phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. "Heard great feedback about the new systems from colleagues. They feel like technology is finally working with us instead of against us. Thanks for listening to what we really needed." Marcus smiled, recognizing how adaptive thinking had enabled him to bridge different worlds: professional and personal, technological and human, analytical and relational, in ways that created value for everyone involved. The convergence of different aspects of his life hadn't created conflict, but had generated new possibilities for wisdom and positive impact that he could never have achieved through technical expertise alone. Chapter 9. The Art of Integration. The late summer sun cast long shadows across Elena's office as Marcus arrived for what had become one of their most significant sessions. He had just been offered the position of Chief Strategy Officer at his firm, a role that would test everything he had learned about adaptive thinking in new and challenging ways. "I should be excited," he told Elena, settling into a familiar chair where they had explored so many dimensions of thinking and leadership over the past year. "Instead, I find myself questioning whether I'm ready for this level of responsibility. It's not just about strategic analysis anymore. It's about shaping how an entire organization approaches complex challenges." Elena listened thoughtfully, her attention focused entirely on his words and the emotions beneath them. The late afternoon light filtering through her windows created an atmosphere of gentle reflection. "Tell me," she said, "how has your understanding of adaptive thinking evolved since we first began working together?" The question invited deep reflection. Marcus thought about his journey from that first frustrated encounter in their office building to this moment of expanded opportunity and responsibility. "I used to think adaptive thinking was about being smart enough to find optimal solutions," he began slowly. "Now I understand it's about being wise enough to create conditions where better solutions can emerge through collaborative exploration." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "It's about recognizing that the most complex challenges require multiple forms of intelligence working together." He described how the healthcare project had evolved far beyond its original scope, becoming a catalyst for transformation in how medical institutions approach technology integration. What had started as an efficiency initiative had become a model for honoring both innovation and human wisdom in organizational change. But this new role, he continued, feels different. The decisions I make will affect not just project outcomes, but the professional lives of hundreds of people. My strategic choices will influence how the firm develops its culture and capabilities. Elena nodded understandingly. Perhaps this is a perfect opportunity to synthesize everything you've learned. Tell me about a specific challenge you anticipate in this role. Marcus described a firm's need to evolve their service model toward more complex, multi-stakeholder engagements while maintaining their reputation for analytical rigor. We need to innovate to stay competitive, he explained. But I'm concerned about how this change will affect our senior partners who have built their expertise around more traditional consulting approaches. Ah, Elena smiled. Now this is where true adaptive thinking shows its power. How might you approach this challenge using everything you've learned about integration and collaborative development? As Marcus thought aloud, drawing connections between different aspects of his learning, Elena could see the synthesis taking shape. His experience with the healthcare project had taught him how to honor existing expertise while introducing new capabilities. His mentoring work had shown him how to guide others through transformation without threatening their sense of competence. I would start by acknowledging that this isn't just a business challenge. It's a human one, he said, his thinking gaining clarity as he spoke. We're not just changing service models. We're asking experienced professionals to expand their identities and capabilities. He continued thinking through the approach, describing how he might create learning partnerships between senior partners and emerging specialists, design pilot projects that demonstrated integration rather than replacement, and establish forums for sharing both successes and challenges in adapting their consulting model. The key, he realized as he spoke, is making everyone part of the innovation process instead of having change imposed from above. We can co-create our future strategic direction together. Elena beamed with recognition. Now you're seeing the full integration. Adaptive thinking at its most mature level isn't just about individual analysis. It's about facilitating collective wisdom and organizational learning. Their conversation shifted to the broader implications of his expanded role. As Chief Strategy Officer, Marcus wouldn't just be solving strategic problems. He would be helping shape how the organization thought about thinking itself, how they approached uncertainty and complexity as fundamental aspects of their client work. Remember, Elena advised, innovation isn't just about new methodologies or technologies. It's about creating environments where people feel safe to explore, question, and grow together. Your role is to be a steward of that learning environment. The weeks following the promotion tested this understanding in immediate and practical ways. Marcus's first major initiative was to establish what he called strategic learning labs, cross-functional teams where consultants at all levels could explore emerging client challenges and develop new approaches together. During one particularly memorable lab session, a veteran partner and a recent MBA hire collaborated on a framework for helping family-owned businesses navigate generational transitions. The partner brought decades of relationship-building wisdom, while a new hire contributed fresh insights about technological tools for family communication and decision-making. This is remarkable, the partner told Marcus afterward. I was skeptical about these collaborative approaches, but working with fresh perspectives has actually enhanced rather than threatened my expertise. I feel like I'm growing instead of becoming obsolete. Marcus brought these insights to his next session with Elena, now held in her garden where autumn flowers created a backdrop of seasonal transition. It's fascinating how often the solution to organizational challenges lies in reframing how we think about expertise and learning, he reflected. Elena nodded approvingly. You've discovered that adaptive thinking scales beautifully from individual development to organizational transformation. The same principles that help us navigate personal complexity can guide entire systems toward greater wisdom and effectiveness. This understanding proved crucial when Marcus faced his first major crisis in the new role. A significant client engagement had encountered unexpected complications when stakeholder priorities shifted dramatically mid-project. The traditional approach might have focused on contract modifications and scope management, but Marcus applied his integrated understanding of adaptive thinking. Instead of treating the situation as a problem to be managed, he reframed it as an opportunity for deeper value creation. He facilitated sessions where both the consulting team and client stakeholders could explore what the changing priorities revealed about their underlying strategic needs. Every disruption contains information about how to create better solutions, he told Combined Group. Let's use this challenge to design an even more effective approach to your strategic objectives. The process to follow was complex and required significant patience from all parties, but ultimately led to outcomes that exceeded everyone's original expectations. More importantly, it demonstrated how adaptive thinking principles could transform potential conflicts into opportunities for innovation and stronger relationships. As autumn deepened, Marcus reflected on how his role had evolved from problem solver to wisdom facilitator. He was no longer just applying analytical frameworks to client challenges. He was helping organizations develop their own capacity for adaptive thinking and collaborative innovation. You know, he told Elena during one of their sessions as leaves fell outside her office windows, I'm beginning to think that the highest form of strategic leadership isn't about having the best ideas. It's about creating conditions where the best ideas can emerge from collective intelligence. Elena smiled warmly, and in that understanding, she said, you've discovered something profound about the nature of wisdom itself. It's not something we possess individually, but something we cultivate together through the quality of our thinking and the environments we create for learning and growth. Chapter 10. The Depth of Wisdom. The first frost of winter had painted delicate patterns on Elena's office windows as Marcus sat contemplating a decision that would integrate everything he had learned about adaptive thinking with the most personal aspects of his life. His father had been diagnosed with serious illness, requiring complex medical decisions, while simultaneously he was leading his firm through its most ambitious strategic transformation. Life has a way of testing our principles most thoroughly when different aspects of our existence intersect, Elena observed, pouring them both cups of steaming tea. They had moved their session to her comfortable office as the weather grew colder, the warm lighting creating an atmosphere of thoughtful intimacy. Marcus found himself drawing unexpected parallels between the strategic decisions he was making at work and the medical choices his family was navigating. Both required integrating analytical information with human values. Both involved uncertainty and competing priorities, and both demanded the kind of collaborative wisdom he had been developing over the past year. The framework I use to help the healthcare client navigate technology integration, he told Elena, is actually helping our family think through treatment options. We're not just analyzing medical data. We're exploring what quality of life means, what risks are acceptable, what our hopes and fears tell us about our values. Elena listened intently as he described how his adaptive thinking skills were helping him facilitate difficult family conversations. Instead of trying to find the right medical choice, he was helping his parents and siblings create space for exploring different perspectives on treatment approaches, quality of life considerations, and end-of-life values. It's remarkable, he continued, how the same principles that improve business decision-making can enhance personal and family choices. The key insight is that complex decisions aren't just analytical problems. They're human challenges that require both intellectual rigor and emotional wisdom. This integration was being tested daily at work as well. As Chief Strategy Officer, Marcus was guiding the firm through a fundamental evolution of their business model, moving from traditional consulting toward what he called organizational wisdom development, helping clients build their own capacity for adaptive thinking and collaborative innovation. The transformation wasn't without challenges. Some partners worried about moving away from the expert-driven model that had built their reputation. Others questioned whether clients would pay for what seemed like more collaborative, less directive approaches. During one particularly tense partners meeting, Marcus applied the same integration of analytical and emotional intelligence he was using in family medical discussions. Instead of defending his strategic vision with data alone, he acknowledged both the excitement and anxiety that organizational change was creating. I understand the concerns about evolving our model, he began. Our traditional approaches have served us and our clients well. The question isn't whether to abandon what works, but how to build on that foundation to meet increasingly complex client challenges. He shared examples of how their new approaches were actually enhancing rather than replacing their analytical capabilities, describing client engagements where collaborative wisdom development had led to breakthrough innovations that pure expert-driven consulting might have missed. The conversation that followed was different from their usual partnership discussions. Instead of debate between competing positions, it became an exploration of how to honor their legacy while evolving their capabilities. By the meeting's end, They had developed an integrated approach that combined their analytical strength with expanded capacity for facilitating organizational learning. During his next session with Elena, Marcus reflected on how these parallel challenges were deepening his understanding of adaptive thinking. "I'm seeing how personal growth and professional development aren't separate processes," he said. "The wisdom I'm developing through family health decisions is informing my strategic leadership, and vice versa." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "When we develop adaptive thinking deeply enough, these artificial boundaries begin to dissolve. We start recognizing that all complex challenges, whether personal, professional, or societal, require similar capacities: the ability to integrate different forms of knowledge, to hold space for multiple perspectives, and to navigate uncertainty with both courage and humility." This integrated understanding was tested when Marcus faced a crisis that required both personal and professional wisdom simultaneously. A major client was considering terminating their contract after preliminary results from their organizational development work didn't match their expectations for immediate, measurable change. At the same time, his father's medical team was recommending a treatment approach that offered statistical improvements, but would significantly impact his quality of life. Both situations required the same kind of adaptive thinking: integrating quantitative data with qualitative values, balancing short-term and long-term considerations, and making decisions under uncertainty. In both cases, Marcus applied what he had learned about creating space for deeper exploration rather than rushing to conclusions. With the client, he facilitated sessions that explored what their initial disappointment revealed about their underlying expectations and change process needs. With his family, he guided conversations that helped everyone articulate their values and concerns more clearly. The client situation ultimately led to a redesigned engagement that better matched their organizational culture and change capacity. The family medical decisions resulted in a treatment approach that balanced clinical effectiveness with his father's priorities for remaining active and engaged. "Both situations taught me the same lesson," Marcus told Elena as winter deepened around them. "The most complex challenges often require us to expand our definition of what constitutes relevant information and valuable wisdom." Elena smiled knowingly. "You've discovered something profound about the nature of adaptive thinking. At its highest level, it's not just a professional skill or a personal capability. It's a way of engaging with life's complexity that honors both analytical rigor and human wisdom." As their session continued, Marcus shared how these experiences were influencing his vision for the firm's future development. He was beginning to see consulting not just as problem-solving for organizations, but as helping human systems develop greater capacity for navigating complexity and uncertainty together. "The future challenges our clients face, technological disruption, social change, environmental pressures, require more than technical solutions," he explained. "They need to develop organizational wisdom, the capacity to integrate different forms of knowledge, adapt to changing circumstances, and make decisions that serve both immediate needs and long-term flourishing." Elena listened with evident pride in his growth. "And that vision," she said, "represents a natural evolution of everything you've been learning. Adaptive thinking ultimately isn't about individual mastery. It's about contributing to collective wisdom and human flourishing." As winter snow began falling outside the windows, Marcus felt a deep sense of integration. The skills Elena had helped him develop weren't just making him more effective professionally. They were enhancing every aspect of his life, from family relationships to community involvement to his sense of purpose and contribution. The journey toward adaptive thinking, he realized, was ultimately about developing the capacity to engage with life's full complexity with both intellectual clarity and human compassion. It was about becoming the kind of person who could hold space for uncertainty while moving forward with wisdom and integrity. Chapter 11. The Flow of Understanding. The early spring light filtered through Marcus's office window, casting a warm glow on the sketches and mind maps that covered his conference table. What had started as a routine strategy meeting had evolved into something more organic, a visual exploration of how different aspects of their firm's challenges connected and influenced each other. "I've noticed something interesting happening in my thinking," he told Elena during their next session in her slowly awakening garden. "It's as if analytical and creative processes aren't separate anymore. They're flowing into each other naturally, creating insights I wouldn't have reached through pure logic alone." Elena smiled. gesturing toward early crocuses pushing through the last patches of winter snow. Like these flowers emerging, she said, our thinking processes don't follow rigid categories when they're truly integrated. Mastery comes when we learn to flow between different modes of thought as naturally as nature shifts between seasons. This integration had begun manifesting in unexpected ways during Marcus's client work. While developing a digital transformation strategy for a manufacturing company, he found himself drawing parallels between their production systems and jazz improvisation, how both required structured frameworks that could adapt fluidly to changing conditions. It's fascinating, he shared with his client team, how often breakthrough solutions emerge when we allow ourselves to think both systematically and metaphorically. Your manufacturing expertise might inform how we approach organizational change, while musical improvisation principles might guide how your systems adapt to market variations. This approach led to innovations none of them had anticipated. They developed implementation strategies that combined rigorous project management with the kind of responsive flexibility that jazz musicians use when building on each other's contributions. Elena helped him understand the deeper significance of this evolution during one of their walks through the city. When we develop adaptive thinking deeply enough, she explained, the boundaries between different types of intelligence begin to dissolve. Analysis becomes creative. Creativity becomes analytical, and both become tools for wisdom. This integrated thinking proved particularly valuable when Marcus faced a complex challenge with multiple, seemingly incompatible constraints. A healthcare client needed to reduce operational costs while improving patient satisfaction and staff morale, objectives that traditional analysis suggested might be mutually exclusive. Instead of choosing between competing priorities, Marcus guided a client through what he called paradox exploration, examining how apparent contradictions might actually point toward innovative solutions. What if cost reduction, patient satisfaction, and staff morale aren't competing goals? He suggested during a stakeholder meeting. What if they're different dimensions of the same underlying challenge, creating systems that work more effectively for everyone involved? This reframing led to breakthrough insights. They discovered that many costly inefficiencies were also sources of patient and staff frustration. By redesigning workflows to eliminate waste, they simultaneously reduced costs, improved patient experience, and created more satisfying work environments for healthcare providers. You've created something remarkable here, observed Dr. Chen, the hospital's chief medical officer. Not just cost savings, but a more coherent approach to healthcare delivery that serves multiple stakeholder needs simultaneously. Marcus shared the success with Elena during their next meeting, as spring warmth began to fill her garden with new growth. I'm beginning to see how different types of challenges require different combinations of thinking approaches, he reflected. Technical problems might need more analytical focus, while human challenges require more empathy and systems thinking. But the most complex situations need all of these capacities working together. Elena nodded approvingly. You're discovering what ancient wisdom traditions have long understood, that the highest forms of intelligence integrate multiple ways of knowing. Logic, intuition, emotion, and experience all contribute to wise decision-making when we know how to access and coordinate them. This understanding began transforming how Marcus approached his leadership role at the firm. Instead of defaulting to purely analytical frameworks, he started incorporating what he called wisdom practices, approaches that engage different types of intelligence depending on the situation's requirements. During strategic planning sessions, he might begin with meditation or reflection to access intuitive insights before moving into analytical evaluation. For conflict resolution, he would create space for emotional expression and storytelling before engaging logical problem-solving. When exploring innovation opportunities, he encouraged creative exercises alongside market analysis. Our thinking is becoming more fluid, observed Patricia, one of the firm's senior partners, after a particularly productive planning retreat. We're still rigorous in our analysis, but we're also accessing insights that pure logic might miss. It feels like we're using more of our collective intelligence. This evolution attracted attention from other organizations seeking similar integration. Marcus found himself increasingly invited to speak about what he called integral consulting, approaches that combine analytical rigor with creative exploration, strategic thinking with human wisdom. One particularly memorable engagement involved helping a technology company navigate ethical challenges related to artificial intelligence development. The traditional approach might have focused on compliance frameworks and risk management, but Marcus guided them through a more comprehensive exploration. "We're not just managing risks," he told their leadership team. "We're exploring what it means to develop technology that enhances rather than diminishes human flourishing. This requires both technical understanding and ethical imagination, both logical analysis and moral intuition." The framework they developed integrated technical specifications with value-based principles, creating AI development processes that were both innovative and ethically grounded. More importantly, the process helped the company develop internal capacity for navigating future ethical challenges as they emerged. As spring progressed towards summer, Marcus noticed this integrated approach influencing all aspects of his life. His conversations with his father about health decisions flowed naturally between medical data analysis and deeper discussions about meaning and values. His strategic planning incorporated both market research and insights from literature, philosophy, and other fields that informed his understanding of human motivation and social change. "You know," he told Elena during one of their sessions as her garden reached full bloom, "I used to think adaptive thinking was about becoming better at analysis. Now I understand it's about learning to dance with complexity, using whatever forms of intelligence the situation requires." Elena smiled, watching a butterfly navigate between flowers. "And in that dance," she added, "we find not just better solutions, but a richer, more integrated way of being in the world. When thinking becomes truly adaptive, it transforms from a tool we use into a way we live." Chapter 12. The Ripple Effect Expands. The summer heat shimmered off the Manhattan pavement as Marcus walked toward the conference center, where he would deliver the keynote address at the International Strategic Leadership Summit. A year ago, he would have prepared for such a moment with meticulous slides and carefully rehearsed arguments. Today, he carried only a few notes and a deep confidence in the principles that had transformed not just his thinking, but his entire approach to complex challenges. "Success in leadership," he began, addressing the audience of executives and consultants from around the world, "isn't just about making better decisions. It's about creating environments where better decisions can emerge from collective wisdom." As he spoke, he caught sight of Elena in the audience, her presence a reminder of how far this journey had taken him. The story he wanted to tell went far beyond strategic frameworks. It was about how individual transformation could catalyze organizational and even societal change. Earlier that week, during their preparation session in Elena's garden, now lush with midsummer growth, they had discussed the broader implications of adaptive thinking. "You've observed it yourself," she had said, carefully tending the flowering vines that had grown more complex and interconnected over the months. "How your personal growth has created ripples that extend far beyond your individual influence." Indeed, Marcus had watched these ripple effects with amazement. The approaches he developed were spreading throughout his firm and into client organizations in ways that seemed to take on a life of their own. Teams that once operated in competitive silos were collaborating fluidly. Conflicts that might have escalated into organizational crises were becoming opportunities for deeper understanding and innovation. One particularly striking example had emerged during a complex merger consultation. Two companies with fundamentally different cultures were struggling to integrate their operations. Traditional approaches might have focused on structural changes and process harmonization, but Marcus had guided them through something deeper. Instead of trying to choose between cultures or create a compromise that satisfies no one, he had suggested, let's explore how each organization's strengths might enhance the other. What if this merger is an opportunity to create something that neither company could achieve alone? The process that followed was messy and sometimes uncomfortable, but it led to innovations that surprised everyone involved. The merger became a model for how organizational integration could honor different approaches while creating new capabilities that emerged from their interaction. During his conference presentation, Marcus shared this story to illustrate how adaptive thinking principles could transform organizational challenges. "We're not just combining companies," he told the audience. "We're demonstrating how different forms of organizational wisdom can enhance each other when we create the right conditions for integration." The response was immediate and engaged. Audience members began sharing their own examples of how these principles might apply to their leadership challenges. A healthcare executive described how Marcus's approaches could transform patient care teams. A technology leader saw applications for product development that combined user empathy with technical innovation. But perhaps most significantly, Marcus noticed how the conversation itself was demonstrating adaptive thinking principles. Instead of a traditional presentation where he delivered expertise to passive recipients, it had become a collaborative exploration where insights emerged from the collective intelligence of the room. "You've created something remarkable here," observed Dr. Sarah Kim, a renowned organizational psychologist, during the post-presentation discussion. "Not just a new consulting methodology, but a fundamentally different way of thinking about how human systems can learn and evolve together." This observation proved prescient. Over the following months, Marcus began receiving invitations from organizations worldwide, not just for strategic consulting, but for guidance on developing what they called organizational wisdom, the capacity for collective adaptive thinking. A pharmaceutical company wanted to explore how these principles might transform their drug development process, integrating scientific research with patient experience and ethical considerations. An educational system sought guidance on creating learning environments that combine analytical rigor with creative exploration and social-emotional development. Each engagement deepened Marcus's understanding of how adaptive thinking could scale from individual development to systemic transformation. During his regular sessions with Elena, now held in various settings as their relationship had evolved into a peer collaboration, they explored these emerging possibilities. "What you're describing," Elena observed during one of the conversations in Central Park, "isn't just organizational consulting anymore. It's something closer to social architecture, helping human systems develop greater capacity for wisdom and collaborative problem-solving." This insight led to Marcus's next major initiative, the founding of what he called the Adaptive Systems Institute, dedicated to exploring how principles of individual adaptive thinking could inform everything from organizational development to community resilience to societal innovation. The Institute's first major project involved working with a city government facing complex challenges around technology integration, social equity, and environmental sustainability. These were precisely the kind of wicked problems that required multiple forms of intelligence and collaborative approaches that could adapt to emerging conditions. We're not just solving specific problems. Marcus told a diverse group of stakeholders they assembled, government officials, community leaders, technologists, environmental scientists, and residents. "We're exploring how a community can develop greater capacity for addressing whatever challenges emerge as conditions continue to evolve." The process they designed combined rigorous analysis with community storytelling, technical innovation with traditional wisdom, and individual perspectives with collective intelligence. It was messy, time-consuming, and sometimes frustrating, and it produced innovations that none of them could have imagined working separately. Most importantly, the process itself became a model for how communities could approach complex challenges. Other cities began reaching out, wanting to understand how these approaches might apply to their own situations. "You've created something that transcends traditional boundaries," Elena told Marcus during one of their evening conversations. As summer began transitioning toward fall, individual development, organizational transformation, community resilience, they're all aspects of the same fundamental capacity for adaptive wisdom. As autumn colors began appearing in the city, Marcus reflected on how this journey had evolved far beyond his original professional frustrations. What had begun as a quest for more effective consulting approaches had become something approaching a movement, a recognition that the challenges facing organizations and communities required new forms of collaborative intelligence. His phone showed messages from colleagues around the world sharing examples of how adaptive thinking principles were transforming their work. A former client reported that their organizational culture had become so collaborative and innovative that other companies were studying their approaches. A participant from his early workshops was now training other consultants in these methods. The ripple effects were spreading in ways that none of them could have predicted, and Marcus was beginning to understand that this was exactly how systemic transformation occurred. Not through top-down implementation of new ideas, but through the gradual spread of new capacities for thinking and working together. Chapter 13, Beyond Individual Mastery. The autumn colors were at their peak when Marcus found himself standing before the United Nations Sustainable Development Solutions Network, preparing to address a gathering of leaders from around the world. The invitation to speak about adaptive thinking approaches to global challenges represented a culmination of his journey that he could never have imagined when first meeting Elena 2 years earlier. The most complex challenges facing humanity today, he began, cannot be solved by any single nation, organization, or even discipline. They require new forms of collaborative intelligence that can integrate different types of knowledge, navigate uncertainty, and adapt to rapidly changing conditions. In the audience, he saw faces representing diverse cultures, expertise areas, and organizational contexts, precisely the kind of complexity that adaptive thinking principles were designed to address. The story he wanted to tell was about how individual growth in thinking could scale to address collective challenges of unprecedented scope. Earlier that week, during their regular session in Elena's office, now filled with books and artifacts from consulting projects around the world, they had explored the profound implications of this scaling process. "You've discovered something remarkable," Elena had observed, reviewing reports from various initiatives Marcus was now leading. "How the same principles that help individuals navigate personal complexity can inform how entire systems address challenges like climate change, technological disruption, and social inequality." Indeed, Marcus's work had evolved far beyond traditional consulting into what some were calling systems wisdom development, helping large-scale human systems develop greater capacity for collective intelligence and adaptive response to complex challenges. The United Nations project was the most ambitious example yet. Different countries were approaching climate change, technological governance, and global economic coordination from radically different perspectives, often leading to paralysis or superficial compromises that satisfied no one while addressing the underlying problems inadequately. What if we approach this differently? Marcus had suggested during the preliminary planning sessions. Instead of negotiating between fixed national positions, what if we explored how different approaches to these challenges might enhance each other? What wisdom might emerge from truly integrative thinking at a global scale? The process they designed was unprecedented in its scope and complexity. Representatives from different nations, disciplines, and sectors were brought together not just to negotiate agreements, but to engage in collective learning about the challenges they faced. During his UN presentation, Marcus shared examples of how these principles had generated unexpected innovations. When climate scientists, economists, technology developers, and community organizers were brought together using adaptive thinking frameworks, they discovered solutions that none of their separate disciplines had identified. "We found that environmental sustainability, economic development, and social equity weren't competing priorities," he told the assembly. They were different dimensions of the same systemic challenge, creating human systems that could thrive within planetary boundaries while serving human flourishing. The breakthrough innovations that emerged were remarkable. Economic models that valued ecological health as fundamental infrastructure, technological approaches that enhanced rather than displaced human communities, governance structures that could adapt to changing conditions while maintaining democratic accountability. But perhaps more significant than any specific solution was the demonstration that large-scale human systems could develop greater capacity for wisdom when provided with appropriate frameworks and processes. "You're not just solving problems anymore," observed Dr. Amara Okafor, a systems theorist who had become a collaborator on the UN project. "You're helping humanity develop new organs of collective intelligence. This could transform how we approach civilization-level challenges." This observation resonated deeply with Marcus as he reflected on his journey. During his next session with Elena, as they walked through Central Park amid the falling leaves, he shared this expanding sense of purpose and responsibility. "I used to think adaptive thinking was about becoming a more effective consultant," he said. "Now I'm seeing it as something much larger, a capacity that human systems need to develop if we're going to navigate the complexity of the challenges we're creating for ourselves." Elena nodded thoughtfully, and that recognition points towards something profound about the nature of intelligence itself. Individual wisdom and collective wisdom aren't separate phenomena. They're aspects of the same evolutionary process through which life forms develop greater capacity for understanding and responding to complexity. This perspective was influencing how Marcus approached all aspects of his work. The Adaptive Systems Institute had evolved into a network of practitioners around the world, each adapting these principles to their specific context while contributing to a growing understanding of how human systems could develop greater wisdom. Educational institutions were incorporating adaptive thinking into curricula that prepared students not just with disciplinary knowledge, but with capacities for integrating different types of understanding. Healthcare systems were developing approaches that combined technological precision with holistic patient care and community health perspectives. Business organizations were discovering how to create value that served multiple stakeholder needs simultaneously. One particularly exciting development was emerging from the technology sector, where Marcus had been working with artificial intelligence researchers to explore how human adaptive thinking principles might inform the development of AI systems that enhance rather than replace human wisdom. We're not just building better machines, explained Dr. Lisa Zhang, a lead researcher on the project. We're exploring how human and artificial intelligence might collaborate to address challenges that neither could handle alone. It's like extending adaptive thinking principles into human-AI collaboration. The implications were staggering. AI systems designed using adaptive thinking principles were proving capable of processing vast amounts of data while remaining sensitive to human values and contextual nuances. Rather than replacing human judgment, these systems augmented human capacity for wise decision-making in complex situations. As winter approached, Marcus found himself reflecting on the exponential growth of impact that had emerged from his original personal frustrations with rigid thinking. What had begun as individual development had become organizational transformation, which had evolved into community innovation, and was now contributing to global capacity building for addressing civilizational challenges. "It's remarkable," he told Elena during one of their evening conversations, as snow began to fall outside her office windows, "how personal growth and systemic transformation turn out to be aspects of the same process. The more we develop our individual capacity for adaptive thinking, the more we contribute to collective wisdom, and the more we participate in wise communities and organizations, the more our individual capacity grows." Elena smiled, watching the snow create patterns on the window. "And that understanding," she said, "points towards something beautiful about the nature of wisdom itself. It's not a finite resource that we possess individually. It's an infinite capacity that grows through sharing and collaboration. The more wisdom we contribute to the systems of which we're part, the more wisdom becomes available to everyone." Chapter 14. The Infinite Learning. The first light of spring was beginning to filter through Elena's office windows as Marcus prepared for what would be their final formal mentoring session. 3 years had passed since their initial encounter, and the journey had taken them both to places neither could have imagined. The relationship between them had evolved from mentor and student to collaborative partners in exploring the frontiers of human thinking and systemic wisdom. "Sometimes," Elena said, settling into her familiar chair with a cup of morning tea, "the most profound transformations happen so gradually that we only recognize their full scope when we pause to reflect on the entire journey. Tell me, what has changed in your understanding of adaptive thinking since we began?" Marcus looked around the office that had become such an important space for his development. The books lining the walls, the comfortable chairs where they had explored countless dimensions of thinking and wisdom, the window views that had provided backdrop for so many breakthrough insights. All of it felt like sacred space where transformation had been nurtured and celebrated. "I used to think adaptive thinking was a skill to master," he began, his voice carrying the depth that had developed through years of reflection and practice. "Now I understand it's more like a way of being in relationship with complexity and uncertainty. It's not something I do. It's become part of who I am and how I engage with the world." He described how the principles they had explored together had influenced every aspect of his life. His relationships had become richer and more authentic as he learned to hold space for different perspectives while maintaining his own integrity. His work had evolved from problem-solving to wisdom cultivation, helping human systems develop their own capacity for intelligent response to complex challenges. "But perhaps most significantly," he continued, "I've learned that growth never really stops. Every new challenge, every new relationship, every new level of responsibility creates opportunities for deeper understanding and more integrated wisdom." This recognition had been reinforced by recent developments in his work. The Adaptive Systems Institute had become a global network of practitioners, researchers, and organizations committed to developing human capacity for collective intelligence. Projects were emerging on every continent, each adapting core principles to local context while contributing to an expanding understanding of how wisdom could be cultivated at scale. The United Nations initiative had spawned similar efforts in multiple international contexts. Regional governments were applying these approaches to cross-border challenges like water management and migration. Professional associations were developing adaptive thinking competencies for their members. Even religious and spiritual communities were finding that these principles enhance their capacity for interfaith dialogue and collaborative service. What you created, Elena observed, has transcended any single methodology or framework. It's become a catalyst for a broader evolution in how human beings approach complex challenges together. Marcus nodded, thinking about the latest reports from practitioners around the world. A group in Southeast Asia had adapted the principles for post-conflict community healing. African researchers were exploring how traditional wisdom practices could be integrated with contemporary adaptive thinking approaches. European organizations were using these frameworks to address climate change adaptation at regional scales. Each application was teaching them something new about the fundamental principles of adaptive thinking, while demonstrating their remarkable flexibility and power when applied with wisdom and appropriate cultural sensitivity. The most exciting discovery, Marcus shared, is how these approaches seem to unlock capacities that already exist within human systems. We're not imposing external techniques. We're helping communities and organizations access their own inherent wisdom more effectively. This understanding had led to the development of what they were calling indigenous adaptive thinking, approaches that honor traditional ways of knowing while integrating contemporary insights about complexity, systems thinking, and collaborative intelligence. Elena smiled, clearly moved by the scope of transformation that had emerged from their work together. "You know," she said, "when I first shared these ideas with you, I hoped they might help you navigate workplace challenges more effectively. I never imagined they would contribute to global capacity building for addressing some of humanity's most complex challenges." Their conversation turned to the future directions that were emerging from this work. Marcus described plans for establishing adaptive thinking learning centers in different regions of the world, each designed to serve as both research sites and practical laboratories for developing collective wisdom in specific cultural and environmental contexts. There were also discussions about integrating these approaches into formal educational systems, from elementary schools through graduate programs, helping new generations develop thinking capacities appropriate for the complexity they would inherit. But perhaps most importantly, Marcus said, we're beginning to understand how individual development and collective transformation are aspects of the same evolutionary process. The more we each develop our capacity for adaptive thinking, the more wisdom becomes available in the systems of which we're part. Elena nodded approvingly, and that understanding points towards something beautiful about the nature of learning itself. True learning never ends. It just keeps deepening and expanding into new domains of understanding and application. As their session drew toward a close, Marcus felt both gratitude and anticipation. Gratitude for the profound journey they had shared, and anticipation for the continuing adventure of growth and contribution that lay ahead. "You realize," Elena said with a gentle smile, "that this isn't really an ending at all. The principles we've explored together, curiosity, integration, collaborative wisdom, continuous learning, these are lifelong practices that will keep revealing new dimensions and applications throughout your journey." Marcus stood to leave, taking one last look around the office that had nurtured so much transformation. Through the spring-touched windows, he could see the city awakening to a new day, much as he was awakening to new possibilities for contribution and growth. "Thank you," he said simply, knowing that no words could fully express the depth of his appreciation for Elena's guidance and partnership in an extraordinary journey of discovery. Elena smiled warmly. "Thank you for the privilege of witnessing and supporting your growth. And remember, every person you help develop their adaptive thinking capacity, every organization you help become more wise, every system you help evolve toward greater collective intelligence, you're contributing to a transformation that extends far beyond any individual lifetime." As Marcus walked through the city streets toward his office, where new challenges and opportunities awaited, he carried with him not just the specific insights and techniques he had learned, but something more fundamental: a deep confidence in a human capacity for growth, wisdom, and collaborative intelligence. The journey of adaptive thinking, he understood now, was infinite, not because it never reached completion, but because each level of development opened new possibilities for understanding, contribution, and positive impact in an endlessly complex and beautiful world. Epilogue. Seeds of Transformation. 5 years have passed since Marcus's final formal session with Elena. On a crisp autumn morning, he finds himself walking through Central Park, a journal tucked on his arm, much like Elena used to carry during their early sessions together. The morning light filtering through the changing leaves reminds him of countless conversations that shaped his understanding of adaptive thinking and human wisdom. The park bench where he settles has become a place of reflection and planning, much as Elena's office had been during their intensive work together. Around him, the park displays autumn's reminder of life's constant cycles of transformation, endings that are also beginnings, apparent deaths that nourish new growth. Marcus opens his journal to review notes from recent developments in the global network of adaptive thinking practitioners. The Adaptive Systems Institute has evolved into what observers call a learning organism, a worldwide community that continues to discover new applications and implications of the principles Elena first introduced to him in their workplace encounter years ago. The scope of impact has exceeded anything they could have imagined. Educational systems on multiple continents have integrated adaptive thinking into their curricula, helping new generations develop capacities for navigating complexity with wisdom and collaborative intelligence. Healthcare organizations are applying these approaches to integrate technological precision with holistic patient care. Business communities are discovering how to create value that serves multiple stakeholder needs while contributing to social and environmental flourishing. Perhaps most significantly, communities facing complex challenges, from climate change adaptation to technological disruption to social transformation, are using these principles to develop their own solutions rather than waiting for external expertise to provide answers. Marcus's phone shows a message from Dr. Sarah Chun, a former participant in his early workshops who now leads adaptive thinking initiatives in Southeast Asia. The Community Resilience Project in Vietnam has exceeded all expectations. Local leaders have adapted your frameworks so effectively that they're now training other regions. The wisdom was always there. We just provided processes for accessing and coordinating it. This pattern has repeated around the world, confirming Elena's early insight that adaptive thinking principles don't impose external solutions, but help human systems access their inherent capacity for collective intelligence and wisdom. Another message comes from his former client, the pharmaceutical company that had struggled with integrating scientific research, patient needs, and ethical considerations. Their drug development process, redesigned using adaptive thinking principles, had become a model study by other organizations. More importantly, they're now contributing to global health initiatives that demonstrate how technical innovation and social responsibility can enhance each other. As Marcus reviews these updates, he realizes how profoundly Elena's guidance has shaped not just his individual development, but contributed to broader patterns of positive change. Her investment in one frustrated consultant has generated ripple effects that continue expanding in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The sound of footsteps on the path draws his attention. A young woman approaches, looking both determined and uncertain, an expression he recognizes from his own early encounters with complex professional challenges. "Excuse me," she says, "are you Marcus Chen?" "I'm Dr. Aisha Patel. I've been following the Adaptive Systems Institute's work, and I was hoping to discuss how these principles might apply to the climate adaptation challenges we're facing in my region." Marcus closes his journal and gestures to the space beside him on the bench. "Of course," he says, remembering Elena's welcoming presence during their first conversation. "Tell me about the challenges you're navigating." As Dr. Patel describes a complex intersection of environmental, economic, and social factors affecting her community's resilience efforts, Marcus hears echoes of his own early struggles with multifaceted problems that seem to resist simple solutions. "What you're describing," he tells her, "sounds like precisely the kind of challenge that adaptive thinking approaches were designed to address. Not by providing ready-made solutions, but by helping communities develop their own capacity for integrating different types of knowledge and adapting to changing conditions." Their conversation flows naturally from problem description to exploration of principles, from individual frustrations to collective possibilities. Marcus finds himself sharing insights that have evolved through years of practice, while learning new perspectives from Dr. Patel's unique experience and cultural context. An hour later, as their impromptu session draws to a close, Dr. Patel expresses a kind of excitement and hope that Marcus remembers feeling during his early work with Elena. "This changes everything about how I think about our challenges," she says. "Instead of feeling overwhelmed by complexity, I'm starting to see it as rich with possibilities for innovation." As she walks away, already making notes and phone calls to colleagues about new approaches they might explore together, Marcus recognizes a familiar pattern of transformation beginning in another person's life and work. Elena's wisdom continues to spread through countless individual encounters, each generating new applications and adaptations while contributing to humanity's growing capacity for collective intelligence. The autumn sun has warmed the park bench as Marcus returns to his journal. On a fresh page, he begins writing notes for a book he's been considering, not about adaptive thinking techniques, but about the deeper principles of human learning and transformation that he's witnessed operating at every scale, from individual development to global change initiatives. The working title emerges as he writes, "The Infinite Learning: How Wisdom Grows Through Sharing." Elena's influence, he realizes, hasn't just shaped his professional capabilities or even his approach to complex problems. It has revealed something fundamental about the nature of human potential, how individual growth and collective transformation are aspects of the same evolutionary process through which consciousness develops greater capacity for understanding and responding wisely to complexity. His phone buzzes with another message, this one from Elena herself. "Saw the article about the UN adopting adaptive thinking frameworks for international cooperation initiatives. Remarkable how far the seeds have traveled. Looking forward to our coffee next week. Want to hear about your latest discoveries." Marcus smiles, feeling profound gratitude for the mentor who had seen potential in a frustrated consultant and helped nurture it into something that now contributes to positive change around the world. But more than gratitude, he feels a deep sense of responsibility to continue the work of helping human systems develop greater capacity for wisdom and collaborative intelligence. As autumn leaves drift around the park bench, Marcus closes his journal and prepares to return to his office, where new challenges and opportunities await. The journey of adaptive thinking continues, infinite in its possibilities for growth, discovery, and positive contribution to the world's complex challenges. Elena had been right from the beginning. The art of adaptive thinking isn't about reaching a destination of mastery. It's about embracing the eternal dance of learning, growing, and contributing to the collective wisdom through which humanity navigates the beautiful complexity of existence. The seeds of transformation continue to sprout, each conversation, each application, each adaptation generating new possibilities for human flourishing in an endlessly complex and interconnected world.